Rain glazed the streets of a quiet Seattle suburb as Michael Turner, 42, pulled into the driveway of the house he had shared with his wife Karen for 15 years. He'd ended his business trip early, a rare luxury in his demanding work as a software engineer, eager to surprise Karen and their 2 children, Rachel, 15, and Ethan, 11. In his mind, he pictured their smiles, the warmth of a homecoming, maybe even a family dinner before the weekend dot. But as Michael climbed the polished wooden stairs, a different reality awaited. From the half-open door of their bedroom, he heard Karen's voice, not the warm tone he knew, but light, playful, edged with something almost cruel, a walking bank account. She laughed into the phone. "Once the divorce is final, Tom, I'll be free. We'll have everything." Tom Reynolds, the name hit Michael like ice water. Karen's gym trainer, her friend. Michael's hand tightened on the banister, but years of negotiating high-stakes contracts had taught him control. He didn't barge in. He didn't shout. He stepped back into the shadowed hallway, listening as Karen outlined a plan to take half his assets, even his company shares, and start a new life with Tom. In that moment, the Michael Turner who had trusted his wife implicitly began to disappear. In his place stood a man who would fight back, not with rage, but with precision, patience, and a strategy Karen would never see coming. Michael stood in the dim hallway for a long moment, steadying his breath while the sound of Karen's laughter drifted through the cracked door. Years of negotiating multi-million-dollar software contracts had trained him to keep his voice level and his mind clear under pressure. Now, those same skills were the only thing keeping him from stepping into that bedroom and ending it all in a blaze of shouting and slammed doors. Instead, he quietly descended the stairs, slipped out the front door, and eased himself into his car. He drove around the neighborhood in slow, measured circles, letting the rain-slicked streets and the steady hum of the engine give him time to think. There would be no rash moves, not tonight. Michael had learned long ago that in business and in life, the first one to lose control usually lost everything. If Karen wanted a war, he would give her one, but it would be fought on his terms, and he had no intention of letting her see the battlefield until it was too late. An hour later, he returned home, this time making enough noise with the front door to announce himself. "I'm home," he called. Karen appeared at the top of the stairs in a fresh blouse, her smile warm and familiar, as if she hadn't just been conspiring to dismantle his life. He kissed her cheek lightly, hiding the chill in his own expression, then let their son Ethan wrap him in a bear hug. Rachel appeared more reserved, as always, but greeted him with a small smile. Over dinner, Michael played his part flawlessly. He asked about Rachel's science club project, listened to Effen's excited plans for a weekend of pizza and movies, and laughed at Karen's casual small talk. But in the back of his mind, a plan was already forming. When the children were in bed, Michael retreated to his home office. He opened a fresh document on his laptop, not a line of code this time, but a set of digital folders. Each would hold evidence, dates, bank transactions, messages, photographs, anything that could be verified and tied back to Karen's betrayal. He started with the basics: records of their joint accounts, business assets, and property deeds. From there, he noted the upcoming weekends when Karen had yoga retreats or girls' nights planned. He'd check her stories against her location history, social media activity, and credit card charges. Every detail would matter later. He also reached out, quietly, to his company's legal team. Under the guise of reviewing his will, he began asking questions about asset protection in the event of a divorce. He didn't reveal his intentions, not yet, but every answer added another layer to the strategy. The next morning, Michael maintained his calm routine: breakfast with the kids, a quick kiss for Karen, and off to work. But the moment he reached his office, he pulled up a spreadsheet and began mapping out his plan. One column for what Karen already knew, another for what she didn't, and a third for what he wanted her to think. The coming weeks would require absolute discipline. Karen could not suspect that he knew. The full weight of the loyal, slightly distracted husband had to remain intact. If she sensed even a hint of suspicion, she might accelerate her timeline, forcing him into a defensive position. At lunch, Michael walked a few blocks to the courthouse to research public filings, licenses, business registrations, property transactions. He found nothing immediately damning, but that didn't disappoint him. The absence of a trail meant Karen was careful, which meant her mistakes would be smaller, harder to detect, and all the more damaging when brought to light. That evening, over takeout Chinese, Michael studied Karen as she chatted with Ethan about a school field trip. She looked exactly as she always had, polished, charming, perfectly at ease. But now, he could see the cracks beneath the surface, the tiny tells in her eyes and the way her hand lingered a fraction too long on her phone screen. She thought she was in control. She thought she had all the time in the world. Michael, sipping his tea, allowed himself the faintest of smiles. Time, after all, was a weapon, and he intended to use every second. The first rule of uncovering the truth, Michael knew, was to start small and stay unnoticed. 2 weeks after overhearing Karen's call with Tom, he began taking early morning trips to the office that, in reality, ended at Ironworks Fitness, Tom's pride and joy gym on the edge of downtown Seattle. Michael had signed up for a full year's membership, paying in cash. Without so much as a sideways glance from the staff, Ironworks was sleek and modern. All chrome fixtures and mirrored walls, the smell of eucalyptus from the spa blending with the faint tang of sweat. Tom was there often, moving among clients with a polished ease that made him look like he'd stepped straight out of a sportswear ad. He slapped backs, shared inside jokes, and charmed nearly everyone in the building. Michael kept his distance at first, working out in the quieter hours before the morning rush. He was just another guy lifting weights, another middle-aged member trying to keep in shape. But while his hands gripped dumbbells, his eyes and ears collected data. On his third visit, he struck up a casual conversation with the young woman at the front desk. "Nice place you've got here. Been open long, about 5 years," she said with a smile. "Tom built it from nothing. Quite the success story." Michael chuckled. "Impressive. Must be a smart businessman." The woman leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, he had help. His girlfriend invested a lot. She's loaded. Comes in all the time. Stunning woman, always. Dressed to the nines." Michael's stomach tightened, but his expression never changed. "Lucky guy," he said lightly, and walked toward the weight machines. That offhand comment gave him the first real timestamp. 5 years in business. 3 years with Karen's money backing him, money she could only have drawn from their shared accounts. He added it to his mental timeline, noting that Rachel had been 12 and Ethan 8 when this partnership began. Over the following week, Michael widened his net. In the locker room, he listened without looking like he was listening. Trainers, especially one named Matt with a taste for gossip, proved invaluable. Before Tom, Matt told him one afternoon, Karen was seeing some tech investor from California. Big money guy. Flew her down for long weekends. She still talks about those wine tours in Napa. Michael remembered those weekends. Karen had claimed they were girls' trips to Portland. Another trainer mentioned a local artist whose gallery Karen had helped promote. Michael recalled writing a check for one of those events, never realizing it was funding yet another man's lifestyle. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened. Karen had been living a parallel life for years, curating multiple romances while Michael paid the bills and played the faithful husband. She had woven the lies so tightly that even their children had been drawn into the illusion. One evening, back at home, Michael quietly reviewed their bank records. The evidence was hiding in plain sight: charges for upscale restaurants he'd never visited, hotel stays during weekends she'd claimed to be at yoga retreats, wire transfers to an account in Tom's name disguised as consulting fees. By now, Michael's file was substantial: photos from Tom's public social media showing him and Karen at the beach in Mexico, dinner at a rooftop bar in Chicago, a wine tasting in Oregon. Each was time-stamped to weekends or business trips. She'd fed him as cover. Sitting in his office late that night, Michael scrolled through the folder. There was no rage in his face now, only the cold focus of a man building a case airtight enough to withstand any denial. He was past the point of shock. The betrayal no longer stunned him, it clarified his purpose. Karen thought she was orchestrating a clean getaway. She had no idea Michael was mapping every lie, every theft, every stolen hour. He saved the file, encrypted it, and leaned back in his chair. The hunt was just beginning, and Michael Turner was very, very good at finishing what he started. It started as a whisper in the back of Michael Turner's mind, an uneasy thought that had been growing ever since he'd pieced together the full scope of Karen's betrayals. He'd learned she had carried on not just with Tom, but with a tech investor from California, a local artist, and perhaps others he hadn't yet identified. The timeline stretched back years, too many years. One sleepless night, as the wind rattled the windows, the whisper became a question he couldn't ignore. What if Rachel and Ethan weren't his? Michael sat up in bed, the room lit only by the faint glow of the alarm clock. He told himself it was paranoia, the natural byproduct of weeks spent digging through lies. But the idea wouldn't leave. He remembered Karen's sudden mood swings during her pregnancies, the unexplained trips, the way some of the children's features didn't quite match his or his family's. The next morning, after dropping the kids at school, he didn't head to the office. Instead, he drove across town to a discreet medical testing facility tucked into the ground floor of a glass office building. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, handed him a clipboard. "I'd like paternity testing," Michael said, his voice steady. "2 children. You'll need DNA samples from them and from you," she explained. "I can get theirs," he replied. "Toothbrushes, hairbrushes, but I don't want their mother involved." She didn't ask why. She just nodded and explained the procedure, the chain of custody protocols, and the cost. Michael handed over his credit card and paid for rush processing. That night, while Rachel was in the shower and Ethan was building a Lego fortress in the den, Michael quietly collected what he needed: a toothbrush from Rachel's bathroom, a hairbrush from Ethan's desk. Both went into separate, labeled envelopes, sealed tight. 5 days later, an email arrived in his secure inbox. Michael sat at his desk, cursor hovering over the attachment. His breath came slow and deliberate, the way it did before a critical software launch. Then he clicked. The medical jargon filled the first page, but the summary was clear: 0% probability of paternity for both children. For a moment, the room tilted. 15 years of fatherhood, bedtime stories, soccer games, science fairs now separated from him by a single percentage, 0. He pushed back from the desk and paced the room. Rage would have been easy, so would despair, but what came instead was a strange, hollow stillness. Did this change how he felt when Rachel came to him for advice about her coding project? Did it change the warmth of Ethan's hugs when he scored a goal? No, they were his children in every way that mattered except in blood. But Karen had stolen the truth from him, kept him in the dark while building her life with other men, and for that, Michael knew there would be no forgiveness. That evening, he sat with Rachel as she showed him the latest progress on her science club robot arm. Later, he helped Ethan with long division at the kitchen table. He looked at them both carefully, searching for traces of the fathers he would never know, but saw only the kids he loved. He decided then that they would never hear this from him, not now. Maybe not ever. This was a burden he would carry alone. But Karen, she would know that he knew, and she would understand the weight of what she'd done. Michael slipped the lab results into a crisp white envelope and tucked it into his briefcase. The time would come to deliver it, and when it did, the truth would be more than just words. It would be the opening shot in a war she didn't even realize she'd already lost. Michael Turner believed in timing, in software design. The wrong move a second too soon could crash the entire system. In life, a premature strike could ruin the effect. So he waited until every piece of his plan was in place, until the shock would cut deepest. That moment arrived on a crisp Friday evening. From his seat at the polished mahogany bar of the Silver Oak, a fine dining restaurant overlooking the Puget Sound, Michael watched Karen and Tom Reynolds at a corner table. It was the same table where, 15 years earlier, Michael had slid a ring across a dessert plate and asked Karen to marry him. Now, Karen sat across from Tom, wearing a new emerald dress and an expression of smug contentment. A bottle of champagne, its cork still damp, chilled in a silver bucket beside them. Their glasses clinked. Their laughter was low, and intimate to people celebrating the future they believed was theirs for the taking. Michael straightened his tie, reached into his briefcase, and withdrew a white envelope, the paternity results. His lawyer had confirmed that morning that every legal safeguard was in place. This was no impulsive stunt. It was a calculated opening move. He approached their table without hurry, the soft carpet muffling his steps. Karen noticed him first, her smile freezing mid-laugh. Tom turned, his confusion quickly replaced by a smirk. "Michael," Karen said, voice light but tight. "What a surprise. You must be Tom," Michael said evenly. "I've heard so much about you." Tom leaned back, clearly enjoying the moment. "Look, man, I know this is awkward." Michael raised a hand. "Not at all. In fact, I came to congratulate you both on your freedom." He placed the envelope between their plates, a small gift to mark the occasion. Karen's brows were upon. "That's civil of you. I've always believed in closure," Michael replied, then stepped back as if to leave. "What is it?" she asked, curiosity cracking her composure. Michael glanced over his shoulder. "Open it and see." He moved toward the bar but stopped near the coat check, just far enough to watch without being obvious from there. He saw Karen slide a manicured nail under the flap, pull out the documents, and begin reading. Even from across the room, he caught the moment her face drained of color. She passed the papers to Tom. He read faster, his expression hardening, until he pushed back his chair with enough force to rattle the tableware. "You told me they were." Tom's voice carried across the restaurant, drawing the attention of nearby diners. "I thought they were," Karen stammered, her voice cracking. Michael stepped closer, his voice calm but edged with steel. "No, you knew, or at least suspected. The timelines match, don't they? The investor when Rachel was conceived, the artist before Ethan. You knew." Tom's jaw tightened. "You said before me it was just him," he said, jerking a thumb toward Michael. "Tom, please, save it," Tom snapped, tossing his napkin onto the table. "We're done. The divorce settlement," Karen began, "should be interesting," Michael cut in. He nodded once to Tom. "Good luck with everything." Michael turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, Karen's voice rose in desperate protest, but the low hum of whispered conversations from curious diners nearly drowned her out. He didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cold and clean, the lights of the city shimmering off the water. Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his lawyer. "Everything filed as discussed. Court date next week," Michael typed. His reply with steady hands, "Proceed as planned." He slid the phone back into his pocket and walked to his car. Phase 1 was complete. The next phase, the one that would ensure Karen never profited from her betrayal, was just beginning. The morning of the court hearing dawned gray and wet, the kind of steady Seattle rain that seemed to soak straight into your bones. Michael Turner pulled his overcoat tighter as he walked up the wide stone steps of the King County Courthouse, his attorney Cameron Willis at his side. The man's briefcase looked heavier than usual, and Michael knew why. It was packed with the evidence they had spent weeks assembling: financial records, phone logs, photographs, and, most damning of all, the certified paternity test results. Inside, the courthouse smelled faintly of paper and old wood polish. Karen was already seated at the respondent's table with her lawyer, Veronica Tate, a sharp-featured woman in a dark suit who radiated the kind of aggressive confidence only billable hours could buy. Karen herself looked diminished. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her navy skirt suit tailored, but lacking the effortless polish she once wore like armor. Judge Harmon, a woman in her 60s with a voice that could quiet a room in an instant, called the session to order. Cameron went first, methodically laying out the case, the prenuptial agreement Karen had willingly signed 15 years ago with infidelity clauses, the documented affairs spanning years, the paternity fraud proven by independent, court-admissible testing. Every claim was supported with evidence, time-stamped and verified. When Veronica rose, she tried to reframe Karen as a neglected wife married to an emotionally distant husband. She argued that Karen had been manipulated into signing the prenuptial agreement without proper legal counsel, and that the divorce terms Michael was enforcing were unconscionably one-sided. Cameron didn't flinch. "Your Honor," he said, sliding a packet toward the bench. "Here are phone records showing my client's wife consulted multiple divorce attorneys nearly a year. Before these papers were signed, she had both the time and the opportunity to seek counsel. She chose not to." Judge Harmon scanned the pages, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Turner," she said finally, "did you read the divorce agreement before signing it?" Karen shifted in her seat. "I skimmed it. I was upset." "Did Mr. Turner prevent you from seeking legal counsel?" "No." "Then you were aware of the terms you agreed to, including the forfeiture of claims to marital assets in the event of proven infidelity?" Karen's voice was barely audible. "Generally, yes." The judge's tone sharpened. "The court cannot protect individuals from their own poor decisions. The prenuptial agreement is enforceable. The infidelity clauses are enforceable. And the evidence of paternity fraud is both compelling and disturbing." Karen's shoulders sagged. "This court," Judge Harmon continued, "will uphold the financial arrangements outlined in the divorce agreement. Mrs. Turner shall retain only assets solely in her name, and personal property specified in the agreement. Mr. Turner retains all other marital assets, including the family home. Child support will be determined pending further paternity proceedings, if Mrs. Turner wishes to pursue them." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over in less than 2 hours. As they filed out into the marble hallway, Karen caught up to Michael, her heels clicking against the floor. She grabbed his arm. "You've ruined me," she hissed, her voice trembling. "I have nothing left." Michael eased her hand off his sleeve. "You have exactly what you brought into this marriage, your freedom. Isn't that what you wanted?" Her eyes flashed. "Where am I supposed to go? What about the kids?" "You might try Tom," Michael said mildly, "although, from what I hear, he's a bit busy with his own financial investigation these days." Karen's expression shifted: shock, then realization. "You did that too?" Michael only smiled. "Have a good day, Karen." He turned and walked toward the courthouse doors, Cameron falling into step beside him. Outside, the rain was still falling, but to Michael, the air felt lighter. Phase 2 of his plan, ensuring Karen's schemes yielded her nothing, was complete. The weeks after the court ruling were unusually quiet for Michael Turner. He returned to his work schedule, kept his weekends free for Rachel and Ethan, and enjoyed the simple routine of a house that finally felt like his again. Karen, however, had fallen off the map. Word reached Michael through mutual acquaintances, people who still moved in the same social circles. Karen, once dominated, Tom Reynolds, had cut ties almost immediately after that night at the Silver Oak. His gym, Ironworks Fitness, was struggling financially. A quiet audit by state revenue agents had uncovered irregularities in his books, without Michael's silent consent to keep certain financial threads out of the public record. Tom had no incentive to protect Karen. She'd moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment above a strip mall on the south side of the city. Her emerald dresses replaced with clearance rack blouses. Her once sparkling dinner parties reduced to takeout cartons and wine from a box. She was working part-time at a boutique clothing store, the same one where she used to drop thousands in a single afternoon. Michael might have gone on without giving her another thought, until the day she appeared on his doorstep. It was a Saturday morning, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. Michael had just finished mowing the lawn when the doorbell rang. He opened it to find Karen standing there, a thin coat wrapped tight around her, rain beating on her hair. She looked older, worn down, the kind of tired that makeup couldn't. "Hi to Michael," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" He didn't invite her in. "About what?" Her eyes darted toward the street. I can't afford the rent anymore. The boutique cut my hours. I've been applying everywhere, but no one's calling me back. I don't have enough for groceries next week." Michael crossed his arms, and her face crumpled. "I'm asking for help for the kids." "The kids are fine," Michael said evenly. "They're with me half the time, and I cover all their needs. You get your allotted support for when they're with you. That was part of the agreement, but it's not enough," she pleaded. "They're used to a certain life. I can't give them that anymore." Michael's voice hardened. "You didn't seem worried about that when you were draining our accounts to fund trips with other men. You didn't think about their stability when you lied to them about who their father might be. Karen flinched as if he'd struck her. "I made mistakes. You made choices," Michael corrected. "And choices have consequences. You're living with yours." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain tapping against the porch roof. Finally, Karen tried one last angle. "I don't want to fight anymore. Can't we start over, not as a couple, but as friends for the kids?" Michael studied her face, the desperation in her eyes. He thought of the years of deception, the court battle, the hollow victories she'd chased at everyone else's expense. "You're the mother of my children," he said slowly. "That's the only connection we have left. I'll be civil for their sake. But friends, no, Karen. Friends don't destroy each other's lives." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "So that's it. That's it," Michael said, and closed the door. He stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade down the walkway. Then he returned to the kitchen, poured himself another cup of coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, the rain kept falling, but for Michael Turner, the storm had already passed. In the months after Karen's desperate visit, Michael Turner found himself drawn to a kind of order he hadn't known in years. He began with the tangible, cleaning out the attic, boxing up decades of accumulated clutter, and donating most of it to local charities. What remained were memories worth keeping: family photo albums, his father's old Navy watch, Rachel's first robotics trophy, Athens, worn baseball mitt. These went into a cedar chest in his study, a private archive of what truly mattered. Then came the harder task, deciding what to do with the rest of the house, the 4-bedroom home, now quiet half the week when the kids stayed with Karen, held echoes of both joy and betrayal. Yet Michael had no intention of giving it up. He refinanced under his sole name, converting part of the unused upstairs space into a home office and a guest room for visiting relatives. One Saturday, he tackled what he called his truth boxes. Each was labeled in bold black marker: go, stay, travel. Go, items that no longer served him: old clothes, redundant electronics, and anything Karen had given him during the years of her affairs. Stay, essentials and things with personal meaning. Travel, the beginnings of a contingency plan he'd quietly been building since the divorce began. This last category held the most sensitive contents: copies of important documents, a separate bank account in his name only, and a folder marked Portugal. Inside were the deed and property records for a small villa on the Algarve coast, a legacy from his late Aunt Margaret, who had left it to him privately years earlier. It was a place no one in Seattle, not even Karen, had known about. Michael had been in discreet contact with Ana Duarte, the villa's caretaker, and Peter Alvarez, a Lisbon-based attorney who handled the property's legal matters. They helped him ensure the home was secure, utilities active, and taxes current. He kept their correspondence in an encrypted email account, along with scanned copies of the villa's paperwork. One evening, while Rachel was upstairs finishing her homework and Ethan was watching a Mariners game in the den, Michael sat at the dining table with a legal pad. At the top, he drew 3 columns: what they know, what they don't, what I want them to think. Under what they know, he listed the public facts: his job, the Seattle house, the custody arrangement. Under what they don't, he noted the Portugal villa, his private investments, and the new trust account he'd set up for each child, funded with shares from his software company. Locked until they turn 20-5. Under what I want them to think, he wrote, that I am settled here, and that's all there is. It wasn't about deception. It was about control. After years of being blindsided, Michael wanted to ensure that no one, Karen, Tom, or any future opportunist could undermine his stability or the future he envisioned for his kids. Weeks later, he sent a moving company to Karen's apartment with boxes containing all of her personal items still in his possession: clothes, books, knickknacks from vacations she'd taken without him. Each box was labeled and accompanied by a short note in his neat handwriting: returning what belongs to you, keeping what belongs to me. Rachel and Ethan noticed the changes in subtle ways. The house felt lighter, calmer. Michael never spoke ill of their mother, but they sensed he was no longer carrying the weight of her choices. One Sunday evening, after dinner, Rachel asked, "Dad, are we going to stay here forever?" Michael smiled. "As long as it's the right place for us. And if it ever isn't, we'll find somewhere that is." He didn't mention Portugal, not yet. Some truths were best kept in reserve, ready for when they could serve as a gift rather than a defense. The confrontation came sooner than Michael expected. That it was a rainy Thursday evening. The kind where the clouds hung low over Seattle and the streets gleamed under the streetlights. Michael was in the garage, tightening a loose hinge on the workbench, when he heard the front door open and close sharply. "Dad," Ethan's voice called from the hallway. "Mom's here." Michael wiped his hands on a rag and stepped into the living room. Karen stood near the sofa, arms crossed, her posture rigid. Beside her, Rachel hovered awkwardly, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. "I told the kids I needed to speak with you alone," Karen said. "They're in the kitchen." Michael glanced toward the kitchen, where Ethan was already pulling out a board game, doing his best to ignore the tension. "Say what you came to say," Michael replied. Karen's voice was sharp. "You've made things impossible for me. The boxes you sent back, that was petty. And now the kids, Rachel especially, are starting to see me differently. You're poisoning them against me." Michael stayed calm. "I haven't said a single bad word about you to them. They form their own opinions from what they see." Karen's eyes flashed. "Then maybe you should stop playing the saint. You think this little empire you've built your hidden assets makes you untouchable. It doesn't. I know there's more you're not telling me." Michael's tone cooled. "You're not entitled to know anything about my life anymore. That's what divorce means. We agreed to the terms. You lost in court. That chapter is over." Her lips tightened. "I deserve a second chance. For the kids' sake." "What you deserve," Michael said evenly, "is exactly what the law says you get. Nothing more, nothing less. The kids will always have my support. You and I. That's finished." Karen took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You think you've won, Michael, but you can't control everything forever." Michael met her gaze without blinking. "Maybe not, but I can control what I allow into my life. And you're not on that list anymore." The room was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Karen exhaled, a mix of frustration and resignation. "You've changed." "No," Michael said, stepping toward the door. "I've just stopped letting other people write my story." He opened the door and stood aside. After a long moment, Karen walked past him into the drizzle, not looking back. When the door closed, Michael leaned against it, letting the quiet of the house settle around him. Rachel peeked in from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Michael said, offering a reassuring smile. "Go on, finish your game with your brother." Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Michael sat at his desk. The cedar chest was at his feet, the Portugal folder resting on top. He opened it briefly, scanning the familiar property documents, then closed it again. "Not yet," he thought. "Some battles you fight head-on. Others you win simply by living better than your opponent ever imagined you could." And in that moment, Michael Turner knew he had already won. Months turned into a year, and the rhythms of Michael Turner's life settled into something both peaceful and purposeful. The house felt alive again, not with the forced smiles of the past, but with genuine laughter from Rachel and Ethan during family game nights, the scent of his own cooking filling the kitchen, and the satisfaction of knowing every inch of his life was now his to shape. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Michael boarded a flight to Lisbon. He'd told the kids it was a short business trip, but in truth, he wanted to see the Algarve villa in person for the first time since inheriting it. When he arrived, Ana Duarte greeted him with a warm smile and a ring of keys that jingled in her hand. The villa was everything he'd imagined: whitewashed walls, terracotta roof tiles, and a balcony that overlooked the sapphire blue ocean. Standing there, the salty breeze brushing his face, Michael felt a sense of freedom so complete it was almost overwhelming. This wasn't just a property. It was proof that life after betrayal could still hold beauty, security, and possibility. Back in Seattle, he kept the villa a quiet promise to himself. Maybe one day, when Rachel and Ethan were older, they'd come here together. Maybe it would be a place to start fresh chapters. For now, it was enough to know he had choices and that no one could take them from him. Michael had faced deceit, loss, and the kind of legal and emotional battles that could break a man. But instead of letting those wounds define him, he built something stronger, a life on his own terms. Betrayal may change the story you thought you were living, but it doesn't have to be the end. You can take back control, protect your future, and create a life worth living, not despite what happened to you, but because you refuse to let it destroy you. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone tried to take it apart? Your experiences might inspire someone else who needs to hear them. And if you want more stories of resilience, justice, and second chances, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next one.